item number 1, Island Transit Zero Emission Bus Fleet Transition Plan. And this will be presented by our Executive Director, Todd.
Yeah, hey, thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. Great to see you all. I'm very excited about this agenda item, obviously, and today we're here asking for the adoption of the fleet transition plan as prepared by Hatch, so that we then can submit it as support and as required for our federal grants that are due next month. And this will then also allow us to proceed with our transition to a zero emission fleet, which is really exciting. As I mentioned, obviously this document, which you have, is a follow-on from the feasibility report that you got a month earlier. And this work was produced by our consultants Hatch, and it does outline a timeline for purchasing zero emission bus vehicles and also installing the necessary charging, fueling, and maintenance that's infrastructure that's needed to support those vehicles. And this plan, the best way to really understand this plan, I think the board knows this, but just for anybody else that's listening, is this plan is really like our transit development plan. It's a living and breathing document that guides us as we move forward. And as best practices evolve and new technologies develop and funding becomes available, adjustments will be made in the plan. And the thing I really want to underscore is this plan is the culmination of work that we started nearly 3 years ago. Most of the board members will recall that we began this work with a revenue forecast prepared for us by the Western Washington University Center for Economic and Business Research. They presented their findings to the board on January 8th of 2021, 2 years ago. And in their work, they predicted a growth rate of sales tax in excess of 3% through the years 2025. And we did that really to understand the ability of our agency to be able to sustain service improvements and other capital improvements that we might make. And then once we had that financial information, then we completed a route network analysis that a year later, and that out of that came Island Transit Maximized. And you'll recall that we used consultants there and peers to do that work. And Island Transit Maximized included new on-demand service, a new route, and improvement to other routes that we have, as well as a seasonal park route, and of course, very importantly, Sunday service for the first time and late evening service. You all approved that plan last year on April 1st, and we're now in the midst of implementing it. We needed to complete that study and know what our service was going to look like before we could do the third and final piece of this work, which is our zero emission fleet transition plan. We wanted to make sure that whatever we chose as the technology in that plan would support our new service, not only today and tomorrow, but for years to come. And that's really an important thing that we can't underscore enough, that the whole notion that the service needs to determine the technology, not the technology determine the service. You've heard me speak about the nexus between our work on equity and climate, and it's really all about our public, our customers that we serve today and in the future. And really the North Star of all of that is people. And that focus on people is really, really important as we talk about zero emission technology, because we got to find a technology that best suits their needs. Remember, we need to have service that works for our customers, because if they will use it, they will then be reducing their carbon footprint substantially and have a tremendous impact on the environment. Conversely, if we provide a service that no one can use, that will not be happening, and that carbon footprint reduction will not be occurring. So it's really, really important that we utilize technologies that make it possible and convenient for people to use transit. And that point, I cannot underscore enough. And I'm really excited because I think the plan that's before us that Hatch developed with our work, with our help, does just that. And you should all know, and I'm saying this more for purposes of the record, because I think you all do know this, but I think it's important just for everyone to know that we're not just relying on the work of Hatch to make this decision today. Instead, over the past several years, we have spent hundreds, probably likely thousands of hours researching, studying, visiting with experts, talking to those who are further along in this process. And Tom Eichley, our facilities and maintenance manager, we hired just for the purpose to help with this. And he's been doing this since he started here August, more than a year ago. In addition to the many conferences and webinars that we've been participating in through the State Transit Association and also Community Transit Association of America, we've been participating in a new group called Zebra, Zero Emission Bus Resource Alliance. It's a national organization. Tom has also been participating in their regional subgroup that's for transit agencies like ours in Washington and Oregon. And he's also been participating in a state group that focuses on zero emission vehicles as well. And the purpose of all of that work is to share our best practices that exist so we can learn from one another. Because one thing that we all know is you can't rely on a manufacturer of vehicle to tell you really how well that vehicle is going to perform in your circumstances. You really need to learn that from others who are actually doing it. And so that's why these groups are so very, very important. Tom and I also attended the National Conference on Zero Emission Transit Options, ZEVCON. That was in September. And we have been visiting, as you know, with other transits in Washington State that are leading the way in this transition, including Link and Wenatchee. I also visited Spokane Transit to see what they were doing with their battery electric system and inductive charging, and also King County Metro, who has battery electric buses with pantograph charging. Also, I don't know if it was 3 years ago, I was with our prior facilities and maintenance manager and actually visited our main bus manufacturer, the Gillig, who makes the big buses that we have. We visited their factory because they were unveiling their first ever electric bus. And some of you may have heard that during that visit with Gillig, there were a lot of other transit officials there. One of the representatives in our discussions took me aside and said, Todd, you need to know that unfortunately their buses do not yet have the range that's adequate for the service needs of Island Transit. So imagine hearing a sales representative tell you that their equipment isn't good enough for us. And then this summer, Tom and I, of course, visited Orange County Transit to see their battery electric buses as well as their hydrogen fuel cell buses. Foothill Transit also doing the same combination, both in Southern California, and of course the city of Anaheim, who has battery electric buses. And one of the points that Tom always reminds me to underscore, and I haven't done it yet this morning, is the fact that all of these buses are battery buses. They're all electric buses. The difference is that with hydrogen fuel cell buses, as you know, there's a hydrogen fuel cell that provides electricity to run the bus. Whereas with the battery electric buses, electricity is fuels those batteries or provides electricity through charging mechanisms. So that's the difference. They both are basically electric buses. One just has a little bit more equipment on it. So we learned all about battery electric buses, hydrogen fuel cell buses through all of that. And then, as I mentioned, we continue to talk with our peers, including other Washington transit agencies that are looking at a mixed fleet like we are as well, and are pursuing hydrogen in addition to battery electric buses. And of course, another thing that I've been doing is participating in seminars and other training on our grid that we have here in Island County and also in the state of Washington and on the West Coast to better understand what does the future of energy production look like throughout the United States, particularly here, because there are some challenges ahead in terms of, is there enough transmission lines to support the new growth in electricity that will be needed? Is there going to be enough production to support the increasing electrification of everything that we do? So a lot to learn, and we've been learning it. We also met with the hydrogen broker locally, who is working to try to provide hydrogen to folks. And as you know, we've also tried to provide learning opportunities for you, our board members, about all of this. We brought in last year Jim Jensen from the Washington State University Energy Program, who discussed kind of the latest and greatest in zero emission vehicles. We also brought in Richard Durock, my counterpart at Link Transit, and Wenatchee, who talked about the work that they have done. They're the leader in Washington State on battery electric vehicles, and you got to hear some of the challenges that they've had. And then we've also heard from Joe Clark. Joe Clark, remember, is the general manager from Twin Transit down in Centralia, which is the leader in Washington State on hydrogen fuel cell buses and hydrogen production. And of course, the best thing we did was we actually got to visit together one of the leaders in zero emission technology, which was of course Sunline Transit Agency in Thousand Palms, California. And we got to see firsthand not only battery electric buses, but more importantly, all the work that they were doing around hydrogen and have been doing for decades now, and really leading the way. Our learning has included a survey instrument that we contracted with Derek Hachiko to develop and has been sent out, and you all received a memo from Celine O'Donnell Stratton summarizing that, and as well as all the written comments that were provided. So we've been doing a lot of learning, and the good news through all of that, as you know, is that while there are challenges with battery electric buses in some situations, in most situations they will work, but in situations where they don't work, hydrogen will work for us. So we have a plan that's going to work for us at Island Transit. And just to summarize real quickly, you know, the challenges with battery electric include our electrical grid and the storms that we have. It also includes the additional cost of having to have en-route charging and backup power at those facilities. And it most significantly, one of the challenges is the delay in service that en-route charging would create for our bus routes and for our passengers that rely on quick and efficient service. They would be delayed, as well as buses would need to be swapped in. So with all of that, we're really relieved that we do have a technology, hydrogen, which is tested, well tested in the transit world, even though it hasn't been used much in Washington State. As I mentioned before, in California, as you saw, it's been used successfully for many years. You saw it at Sunline. AC Transit, Alameda Transit is the largest bus operator in the state of California. They've been using hydrogen fuel cell buses and battery electric buses for more than 10 years. And just recently, my alma mater, Stanford University, did a survey of their fleet to compare the advantages and disadvantages. And the great news is that hydrogen buses are performing well. They're a tested form of technology and they're doing well. And we heard that when we visited all these other properties. We also know that hydrogen is currently available from several production facilities, and more will be available in the years to come. In fact, Twin Transit, as you know, is going to start producing it next year, green hydrogen, which we potentially could access if that works best for us. Hydrogen will also be produced by a dam in Eastern Washington that has excess power in the off-peak hours. A for-profit energy producer has plans to develop a hydrogen production facility, green production facility in Centralia as well. And the state of Washington, along with the state of Oregon, has applied for billions of dollars to be one of the 6 hydrogen centers in the United States. So what does our fleet transition plan provide? This is really kind of the brass tacks. And really the heart of that plan is on page 27 through 29 in the actual report. For Camino Island, it includes battery electric charging facilities. It also includes replacing the paratransit vehicles that we use there with Ford E-Transit battery electrics or something similar to that. And those will also be used for the new on-demand service that we will be providing on Camino Island that will actually be reaching new customers for the first time on Camino Island. I just need to point that out. And we will be replacing the scheduled route service buses with battery electric buses. These will be full-size battery electric buses. That's Camino Island. That's what the plan says. For Whidbey Island, here, we will have both battery electric charging infrastructure and also hydrogen fueling facilities. We will replace the paratransit vehicles again with Ford E-Transit battery electric vans or something similar to that. We will also use those as well for our new on-demand service that we will have in 4 different zones here at Whidbey Island. And we will replace the scheduled route service, meaning our big routes with big buses with hydrogen fuel cell electric buses. We'll replace our gas-powered rideshare vans with battery electric vehicles. And we've already started that, as you know. We've purchased 5 battery electric sedans that we're about to put into service. This plan envisions a completion date of 2035 for our fixed route buses and 2039 for the rest of our fleet. So here I am today asking you to adopt and to approve the zero emission fleet transition plan, knowing that changes will happen along the way as technology and other things occur. You will approve the purchase of vehicles and infrastructure later. That's not happening as a result of this. Obviously, whenever we have any sort of capital or other costs in addition, in excess of $250,000, we bring that back to you. So the actual approval of construction and purchasing will occur later. And with this plan in place, importantly, not only can we move forward finally with our effort to decarbonize, but we can also apply for this current round of federal funding that will help us get there. So that's my summary. Would be pleased to answer any questions. We've got Tom here as well, or any comments. And if you don't, we would love it if you would adopt and approve this plan. Thank you.
All right, I'll entertain questions. Craig, was that a hand?
I do have a number of questions. Driving our vote today, Todd, you've talked about federal grants that will be opened up and will be available for if we pass this today, and
Right.
or anytime, I guess, until the end of April. You've mentioned April in the past. What can you tell us what the actual date is, just so we have that context?
So Craig, it's a bit complicated. It's April 13th, I think, that the grants have to be into the feds, and I could have that wrong. The reason why it's complicated is we are not a direct recipient of federal funds. We have to go through the State Department of Transportation here in Washington State, and they actually take our materials and add them to other smaller transit agencies and submit our grant requests as a package. So we have to get our stuff done earlier to give to the state of Washington. They then edit and then provide it on. And just this week, we had a meeting with the State Department of Transportation to talk about our two requests, which if you like, I can explain to you what they are. So the clock is ticking, and that's why we got to get this thing approved, because as you noted, in order to be eligible for federal funds for zero emission vehicles, we have to have a fleet transition plan, and that's what this is.
Okay, thank you. I do have a number of other questions here. So I just, in no particular order, I'll just go down the list. So we are sort of betting the farm with hydrogen on Whidbey. And that requires a hydrogen supply, which we know is not that developed in Washington State yet. If we had hydrogen buses running right now, would we have access to, we could actually buy enough hydrogen to run our buses?
The answer is yes. And I just want to correct what you said about betting the farm on hydrogen. Hydrogen would be a portion of our fleet. I think it's 24 vehicles. The majority of our fleet on Whidbey, and of course, all of the fleet on Camino, would be battery electric buses.
Okay, fair enough. So the longer the buses that service the long routes are the ones that are powered by hydrogen.
Correct. And we would expect them to probably get them at the earliest 2 years from now. It takes a while to go through the procurement process, get the funding lined up, and then actually manufacture them. And as you know, there are actually delays in manufacturing right now. So we have plenty of time, and the plan actually takes that into account when it shows the timing for the infrastructure as well as the buses themselves.
Okay, and then the hydrogen itself, obviously we want to burn what's known as green hydrogen. The hydrogen that we have in the state now is not green. Is that correct?
I'm not sure that that's 100%, Craig. We have not gone that far to explore it right now. I do know that there's hydrogen available just north of the border that is green from British Columbia. We also know there's hydrogen in Ferndale, and I believe that the refineries here, and I think there's a third place as well, in Longview. And so I think there is some that is green that is available, but the majority currently isn't, but it will be. over time. And that's why this major federal investment is underway. And that's why
Right.
we're all joining together to do this work.
So can you, you've talked about this plan being a living, breathing document, which is frankly reassuring to hear. Many times technological advancements come out of nowhere, and there's a rapid movement forward. And I'm wondering how nimble can we be with this, an amendment to this plan in the future?
We can be as nimble as we want to be. There's no legal constraint that says that once we adopt this plan, we have to do what it says in it. The plan is a document that helps the Federal Transit Administration understand that we're committed to decarbonization and also that we have the ability to do it. And that's why there's other elements of the plan that I haven't spoken about, including training of staff and safety and some other things. But yes, the nimbleness comes in, as you saw when we were at Sunline. You have a facility there and then you decide, oh gosh, this form of hydrolysis isn't working. We need a more modern one or a green one, or maybe we want to install solar panels. All of that, like any construction or technology project, does take some time, but we're not constrained in any way whatsoever. Okay. Yeah.
So there are no regulatory or legal constraints then?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. And so
I should say, once we get a grant for those things, we have to spend it for those purposes, but new things, there would be no constraints.
Yeah, I was just going to add, any contractual obligations we were into, we would obviously have to deal with those constraints. But overall, for a plan, Todd, correct, it's very nimble. We can change it as we go.
Thank you, Matt. The one thing that I quibble with, and Todd, you and I've had email discussions about this, is that this transition report says that we are at carbon zero in 2039, I think is the year. And in my mind, I would have hoped Hatch would have evaluated this plan from a total life cycle process, where you look at the amount of carbon that it takes to construct a battery electric bus or a fuel cell bus versus the diesel buses, and know that there's a cost there that is paid, and that we won't be at carbon zero in 2039 because we'll be operating buses that have that carbon load that it took to manufacture them. And so Todd, I'll let you reply to that, but what you told me, I think yesterday, was in our conversation, was the industry doesn't look at it that way. And I'd just be curious if you could explore that for the board's benefit.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. So the carbon that goes into the production of the batteries or the fuel cells or the rest of the bus, that's all counted when you actually take possession of the bus. It's accounted for at that point in time. It's not spread out. It's not amortized, if you will, for several years after that. It's taken into account when that happens. And, Tom Eichley did up a nice summary of a large part of that carbon counting when it comes to manufacturing of battery electric buses versus hydrogen fuel cell buses. But no one in the transit industry or anywhere else that I'm aware of does this sort of life cycle or amortization of the impacts of the initial production of that vehicle. Those impacts are considered and taken into consideration at the time you take possession of that vehicle.
And I think my reply to you yesterday is that there is one stakeholder that does bear that load. I mean, we're talking about human constructs there, and the stakeholder that if we take delivery of a bus in 2039, that stakeholder is Mother Earth, because we did purchase a bus that has a carbon footprint in its manufacturing process. So I just wanted to reply to that. A couple other things. You and I've talked about the South Whidbey operating base not appearing in this plan, which we talked about at the previous board meeting. Could you, again, for the board's benefit, take us through that?
Yeah, so again, if it is in the plan, but it's not considered as a fueling station, which I think is what you're referring to, or a charging
Yes.
station. And
Right.
that's because we want to centralize that to keep our costs down and to make it efficient, not only for us, but for our customers, because if we have to do charging at another location while the bus is still out on a route, whether it's at South Woodby Transit Center, whether it's the Clinton Ferry Dock, whether it's somewhere else, that will potentially delay that route. Not only will it delay it, it potentially could require additional buses to be swapped in and out, which has a labor implication, meaning you need to have more people to do that. And the wonderful thing about hydrogen is, this is why we like it, is you don't have to do that with hydrogen. Hydrogen is a proven technology that will work and avoids all of that. So that's why the South Woodby Transit Center wasn't considered in that context, because we're not proposing to do en route or charging away from our two operating bases.
And then my last observation is a small one. On page 29, in the capital investments section, the last bullet point where it starts with 12-year battery warranties are purchased with the bus, removing the need for battery replacement at vehicle midlife. I don't think that's an accurate statement. It removes the need to pay for a battery replacement at vehicle midlife. Isn't that right?
And correct. And that's why it was written that way. The caption is capital investment, meaning cost to us, the money that we expand. And so that's why I was saying it that way. I'm sure there could have been a better way to write that, but to me, it seems pretty clear.
Melanie, I think I saw your hand up, if I'm not mistaken.
My question isn't about the body of the document so much, is just really, I feel silly raising it at this moment, but
There's no dumb question, okay?
thank you. So you know, I'm always about how do we get information out to the public, and the only document, the only hatch study I can find online on the website is the one from January, and the one that we are voting on today is a version from February. And so I was just wondering if there's some place online that citizens, because citizens clearly were really engaged in this. You can look at the survey results and see they were really engaged.
So I don't know that we have put it online yet, the one that's before you today. Unfortunately, as you know, I was away. I came back on Monday, and I've been focused on a lot of different things. And so we probably didn't put it online yet. But the good news is that the plan that you're voting on is exactly the same thing in terms of timing and schedule and costs and impacts as in the report. There's no difference. The only difference is it's a little bit more complete in that it talks about replacing our van pool or our rideshare vehicles. So it's exactly the same. Yes, it would have been ideal if we could have done that, and I'm sorry that we didn't. But this, it isn't any different in any material way.
That's really what I needed to know. Thank you, Todd.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
This is not a question. I feel like we've addressed a lot of this so much as just an update that House Bill 1236, which incentivizes and works to enhance our access to clean energy, clean hydrogen, green hydrogen, is moving quickly through the legislature this year.
Yeah.
And that will be of value to us as we move forward on this. And I also believe, because CURB funded some projects down at the Port of Chehalis, that you may have said this, Todd, that their hydrogen plant down there is green, as well as I think.
Correct. Yes. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Jenny, have you come up with any questions or comments?
I think the majority of mine were answered just throughout conversations and the documentation. I just want to make sure, Matt, that I understand clearly, because we've talked about our agility and sort of the nimble nature of these recommendations, and that if technology should evolve, that we'd be able to kind of move with it. But if I'm understanding correctly, as the grants are submitted, the monies have to be spent regardless of whether or not there's a technology advancement that would make the plan better with what we originally indicated where going to spend the money on. Is that correct? We don't have any wiggle room at all if something changes?
Well,
No, we would have wiggle room. We would just, I mean, if we were in a contractual relationship, we would have to
Okay.
look at the ability to get either out of the agreement or modify it. So
Yeah.
but does that make sense?
It does. So if the grant award has come and we've not yet entered into a contractual agreement, then we do have some leeway to evolve and be nimble. Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood that
There's
clearly.
usually off ramps in any contractual, I mean, when
so
things change in a contractual relationship, then, you know, there's a realm of negotiations, and usually there's termination clauses. There may be
Okay.
consequences for, you know, terminating early or not fulfilling what we need to do, but that would be within the corners of the contract, and something we would look at in any contract we enter into is how
Okay.
how can we potentially get out of it. That's when I look at contracts, I'm always looking for the off ramps. So
Okay, thank you.
So just to be clear, there, as Matt said, there is always room for modification. And in fact, we are doing that right now with the Washington State Department of Transportation. You might recall we received 2 grants for conventionally fueled sets of vehicles. We deliberately did not buy them or act on them because we knew we were transitioning to zero emission vehicles. The last thing that we wanted was to add more diesel vehicles to our fleet that we'd have to wait 7 to 12 years to replace. And so we held off, and now we are negotiating with the State Department of Transportation so that we can instead buy 9 Ford E-Transit battery electric vehicles, which complies with our plan. And so that's an example of doing exactly, Councilmember Bright, what you're asking about. We can negotiate and those sorts of things to do that.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate both of your explanations.
And if you look at the motion towards the end, it says it may be necessary to adjust the plan over time to address advances in technology and unanticipated operational and funding issues. So that, I think they really put in the wiggle room. And then Matt, I'm sure when he's looking at contracts, he can add, but if, you know, we know there's a new technology, we may be able to switch to a different I mean, he'll figure out the words that we need in the contract to be able to, so we're just not stuck. And as our fearless leader over there, Todd, told us that we got the grants, but we didn't act on them. And so now we're renegotiating on, hey, we still need these, but you don't want us to get electric buses, do you? We need to get this. And so I think it's pretty plain, unless anybody else has any other questions about this. But I think the motion is gives us the wiggle room and is says it all. So Craig, yes.
So a couple other things. One thing that was really interesting that I learned yesterday that was really surprising is that apparently the buses that we are, at least the battery buses that are being purchased, have fossil fuel tanks on them to keep passengers warm. Did you want to explain that, Todd?
It's the engines, the batteries warm, and passengers as well, but it's the diesel heaters. That's what Richard Durock, thank you, Craig. Richard Durock from Link was talking about. One of the surprises, you know, here you're trying to be zero emission and you have a battery vehicle, but yet in order for the battery vehicle to function, you have to have these diesel heaters. And it's kind of ironic. Now, obviously, if you operate in an environment that's warm, that's not the case, but we have cold as well. So we would have to have those, at least in our larger buses, not expected in our Ford E-Transits.
Thank you. Also, I want to point out that we talk a lot on Whidbey about the electric grid and its resiliency for obvious reasons. And one of the ways that the entire island can contribute to the resiliency is by establishing and adding microgrids. And these are grids that provide power in power outages that are connected to, say, the bus barn or to batteries, charging up the batteries, so that if we had a multi-day outage, we would have electric power. And so as opportunities come forward for Island Transit to invest in microgrids, maybe in partnership with other organizations or, in property around adjacent property, I hope that we'll consider that. And then just finally, I would hope the board would approve green hydrogen, even if it costs a bit more. Maybe it doesn't. I have no idea what the pricing of hydrogen is, but it would really be unpleasant if we were not purchasing green hydrogen if it's available within a reasonable distance.
Absolutely, yeah.
Janet, you have your hand up.
Thank you. I want to go back to page 22, Todd, and the report, and this is just a financial question. This is a good conversation, by the way. Thank you. We had a meeting and we looked at long-term projections on the impact of this transition. And I think the table in the middle that has figure 8 may address this. In table 4, it talks about the life cycle cost estimates. And we're looking at about a $3 million future fleet increase in cost, yes?
Well, yeah, not just, yes, that includes infrastructure or everything.
Yeah. So what was interesting to me in figure 8 and what I remembered from our presentation is the long-term savings of this transition. I don't know who's got sound going, but of this transition in terms of operation savings. And I remember that being somewhat compelling because our dependence on fuel, while being a good thing, just simply because it's not the dependence on fossil fuels, not a good thing, but also just the savings will accrue. And I want to make sure I have that correct in my head and as it comes out of my mouth.
So we are hearing that there are some savings on the maintenance side. How substantial they are, not yet clear. I mean, if you want to look at like the Alameda Transit study that I talked to you about, there's a lot of good data in there that talks about that. And so I could look at that for you and pull some data. It's not top of mind for me right now. So unfortunately,
Fair.
I can't provide that to you.
It's fair. It's just, I think this is going to be a multi-year transition, and this is going to be a multi-year conversation. And in reading through the public input, which was worth reading through, there were questions clearly about managing this in a fiscally responsible way. And I think ultimately, you don't need to have it top of mind now, but ultimately the ability to demonstrate, the county's doing that in some of our transitions, right? So as we transition to greener ways to manage our facilities, we're seeing a long-term 20-year cost savings that is significant. So I think that is a good stewardship talking point for us to all have in this conversation as well, when we have the data to substantiate it.
Point well taken. Thank you.
Right, unless there are any really pertinent questions, is someone ready to make the motion, please?
I move to adopt recommendations in the Island Transit Zero Emission Bus Fleet Transition Plan completed February 13, 2023, and attached as Exhibit A, including future regulatory and administrative changes. The plan recommendations will be incorporated into the steps Island Transit may take to decarbonize its fleet by 2040. The plan will be submitted to the Federal Transit Administration, Washington State Department of Transportation, and other federal, state, and local agencies to support funding requests, and it may be necessary to adjust the plan over time to address advances in technology and unanticipated operational and funding issues.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Janet. We have a motion by Bacon and a second by Commissioner St. Clair. Sorry.
That's all right.
It's been a long 24 hours for me. All in favor, please raise your hand. Opposed? Thank you, everyone. This is really groundbreaking and exciting, and I'm sure our maintenance and our executive director and the rest of the staff are very happy with this. It's the start, and we've got wiggle room, and let's proceed on. All right, business item number 2, clean.
Before you
fuels
move
and-
on to item number 2, I'm
Okay.
sorry, Beth. I do want to echo your thanks to Tom and Todd and everybody that's been involved in this. But I also would like to ask the question about a press release on this. This is, as you noted, Beth, groundbreaking.
Yeah, I think,
I'm getting head nods in here from our press release person, so
yes.
thank you.